I'm Marion, 29, a software engineer from Boston whose own mother just uninvited me from her 60th birthday bash. Yeah, that kind of stung. So I did what any reasonable adult would do, booked a last-minute flight to Paris, the city my late dad always dreamed of visiting. Never thought running away would give me a front-row seat to my family's complete meltdown or change everything I thought I knew about forgiveness. Before I dive into this mess, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button and buckle up because this family drama makes the Kardashians look functional. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, I was raised in what I'd always considered a close-knit family. Our modest 4-bedroom colonial in Lexington wasn't fancy, but it was filled with laughter, weekend barbecues, and holiday traditions that anchored our lives. Dad Thomas, to everyone else but always just Dad to me, worked as an architectural engineer. He had this infectious enthusiasm for buildings and structures that I definitely inherited, though I channeled it into coding instead of physical architecture. Mom, Linda, was an elementary school teacher beloved by generations of local kids for her patience and creative classroom projects. Then there was my sister Stephanie, 3 years younger than me, but always seeming decades ahead in confidence and social intelligence, where I was the quiet, bookish kid building computers in the basement. Stephanie was class president, prom queen, and everyone's favorite. Don't get me wrong. We got along great as kids. She'd defend me from bullies and I'd help her with math homework. It was a balance that worked. 5 years ago, everything changed when Dad passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. He was only 55. One day he was designing a new community center. The next he was gone. The shock nearly destroyed our family unit. Mom fell into a deep depression that took almost 2 years of therapy to navigate. Stephanie threw herself into her marketing career with an intensity that seemed almost unhealthy. And I retreated into my code, eventually landing a senior developer position at a financial tech startup in Boston. I moved into a sleek apartment in Cambridge, close enough to visit Mom monthly, but far enough to build my own life. These monthly visits became our new normal Sunday dinners where we'd reminisce about Dad, update each other on our lives, and maintain the bonds that had loosened but never broken after his death. I'd notice subtle changes each visit. Mom gradually redecorating the house, removing some of Dad's things, while keeping his important mementos. It felt like healthy progress. When Mom's 60th birthday began looming on the horizon about 6 months ago, Stephanie called me with genuine excitement in her voice. "Marion, we need to make this birthday special for Mom," she said, no greeting, just diving straight in as usual. 60 is a big deal, and after everything with Dad, she deserves something memorable. I agreed immediately. Absolutely. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we go all out, rent a venue, invite all her friends and former colleagues, maybe hire a live band that plays those 70s hits she loves. The planning began harmoniously. We had weekly video calls, shared Pinterest boards of decoration ideas, and split up tasks according to our strengths. I handled the budget spreadsheets and researched venues within our price range. Stephanie, with her marketing background, worked on invitations and theme coordination. We settled on a nostalgic 70s theme, the era when Mom and Dad had met and fallen in love. I found a charming community center with a garden area that fit our budget and could accommodate the 70 guests we'd agreed upon, close friends, family, and colleagues who'd supported Mom after Dad's passing. Stephanie approved enthusiastically, and I put down the deposit. "This is perfect," she said during our video call, her smile genuine as she looked at the photos I'd sent. "Mom's going to love this." I'd been saving for months to buy Mom something special, a custom-made gold locket with Dad's photo inside, and an inscription that read, "Always with you." The jeweler had promised it would be ready 2 weeks before the party, giving me plenty of time to wrap it beautifully. The guest list came together easily at first. Neighbors who'd brought casseroles for weeks after Dad died. Mom's fellow teachers. Her book club friends. Our remaining extended family. I suggested inviting Dad's old colleagues too, several of whom still checked in on Mom regularly. They were such a big part of Dad's life, I explained. And they've been good to Mom. Stephanie agreed, and for a moment I felt that warm connection between us strengthening again. But about 3 months before the party, something shifted. Stephanie began mentioning her new boyfriend Gregory during our planning calls. Gregory came from a wealthy family with connections to Boston's social elite, a world entirely foreign to our middle-class upbringing. Gregory thinks we could upgrade a few elements, she mentioned casually during one call. His mother knows an amazing event planner who might give us a discount. I felt a small twinge of concern but brushed it aside. Sure, as long as it fits our budget. Mom wouldn't want us going overboard on expenses. Well, about that. Stephanie hesitated. Gregory's family might contribute a bit. They're really impressed with Mom and want to help make this special. That's when the red flags started appearing, small at first, but increasingly impossible to ignore. The proposed guest list began expanding to include people Mom barely knew, associates of Gregory's parents, some local business owners, even a city councilor. Mom doesn't even know Councilor Brennan. I objected during one particularly tense call. Why would he come to her birthday? Networking opportunities, Stephanie replied as if it were obvious. Gregory says it's always good to connect with influential people. Plus, it elevates the whole event. But this is Mom's birthday, not a networking event, I countered, trying to keep my voice level. Shouldn't it be about what would make her happy? This will make her happy, Stephanie insisted. Being connected to important people instead of just sitting around reminiscing about the past. We need to help her move forward, not keep her stuck. That comment stung, the implication that honoring our family traditions somehow meant holding Mom back. Still, I tried to stay positive, to believe we could find common ground. After all, we both wanted to create a special day for the woman who had given us everything. I just didn't realize how differently we'd come to define special. The breaking point came during a video call 6 weeks before the party. Stephanie had Gregory sitting beside her, this time a tall, well-groomed man with the kind of casual confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. I'd only met him once briefly during a holiday visit where he'd spent most of the time on his phone and asked me if coding was still a viable career path, with the air of someone discussing an obsolete trade like typewriter. Repère. We've been reviewing the venue situation, Stephanie began, her voice taking on that professional tone she used when delivering difficult news to clients. And we think the community center might not be the right atmosphere. I felt my stomach tighten. What does that mean? We already put down a non-refundable deposit. Gregory leaned forward slightly. I've spoken with the events director at Westfield Country Club. They had a cancellation for that weekend and can accommodate us. Much more elegant setting, private bar, proper wait staff. Night and day difference, really. The country club. That's completely outside our budget, I said, already, calculating the astronomical difference in cost. Plus, it's not Mom's style at all. She'd feel uncomfortable there. Stephanie's expression hardened slightly. That's exactly the problem, Marion. We're trying to give Mom new experiences, not just recreate the same potluck-style gatherings we've always had. The community center feels, honestly, a bit low class for such a milestone birthday. The words hit me like a physical blow. Low class. The judgment in her voice made it clear she wasn't just critiquing the venue, she was critiquing our entire upbringing, the modest celebrations that had always been filled with love, if not luxury. Mom doesn't care about fancy venues, I argued. Remember her 50th? We had it in the backyard with string lights and Dad's homemade barbecue, and she said it was the best birthday she'd ever had. That was a decade ago, Stephanie countered. Before Dad died. Before everything changed. We need to help her create new memories, not just cling to the past. Gregory nodded sagely beside her as if she'd said something profoundly wise instead of deeply hurtful. And the 70s theme feels a bit tacky, he added, wincing slightly. We were thinking something more elegant. Classic, black and white, perhaps. Timeless. Timeless, I repeated incredulously. The 70s theme was about Mom and Dad's story, how they met at that disco in '79. It has actual meaning. Marion, you're being difficult, Stephanie sighed, exchanging a look with Gregory that made my blood boil. This is exactly why we can't seem to make progress. You're so stuck on doing things exactly the way Dad would have that you can't see we're trying to help Mom move forward. The conversation deteriorated from there. I tried to advocate for keeping at least some elements of our original plan, but each suggestion was dismissed. Mom's favorite local band was deemed too amateur compared to the jazz quartet Gregory knew. The homemade photo collage I'd been working on was sweet, but not quite right for the aesthetic. Even the menu choices were being overhauled from Mom's favorite comfort foods to trendy small plates I couldn't pronounce. When I asked directly what Mom thought about all these changes, Stephanie's vague. She's excited about being surprised, set off alarm bells. The call ended abruptly when I asked point blank if these changes were for Mom's benefit or for Gregory's family's impression. 2 weeks later, still stewing from that confrontation but trying to focus on the positive, I received the text that would change everything. Marion, I think it's best if you step back from the birthday planning. Your resistance to necessary changes is creating drama that Mom doesn't need right now. We've decided to handle the rest of the arrangements. We'll send Mom your love on the day. I stared at my phone in disbelief, reading and rereading the message until the words blurred. Step back from the planning. That wasn't what shocked me the most. The careful wording took a moment to decode, but when it hit me, my hands actually started shaking. She wasn't just removing me from the planning committee. She was uninviting me from my own mother's birthday celebration. I scrolled up through our text history in shock, then noticed she'd attached screenshots of a group chat I wasn't part of. There was Stephanie Gregory, his mother Elaine, and a few others discussing the revised plans. The venue had indeed been changed to the country club. The guest list had nearly doubled. There was talk of a photographer from Boston Magazine covering the event as part of a society page spread. And worst of all, a message from Mom herself. Whatever you think is best, dear. I trust your judgment. With numb fingers, I immediately called Mom. The conversation that followed would replay in my mind for weeks afterward. Mom, did you know Stephanie is cutting me out of your birthday? I asked, the moment she answered, my voice cracking despite my best efforts. A long pause. Marion, honey. She explained that you two were having creative differences about the planning. I thought you'd decided to let her take the lead. Mom, she uninvited me. From your birthday. Your own son. Another pause, this one heavier. I'm sure that's not what she meant. You know how Stephanie gets caught up in details. I'll talk to her. So you didn't know, I pressed. The silence that followed told me everything. She had known. Maybe not explicitly. Maybe not in those exact words. But she had known. Her daughter was pushing her son away and had chosen not to intervene. Marion, please try to understand. Stephanie has put so much work into this. Gregory's family is being very generous. I don't want to cause any problems. And uninviting your son doesn't count as a problem. The hurt made my voice sharper than I'd intended. It's just one birthday, she said quietly. We can celebrate together another time, just the two of us. Sometimes keeping the peace means compromising. Keeping the peace. The words echoed in my head like a bad joke. Since when did peace require the sacrifice of basic decency? Since when did it mean excluding family? So you're okay with this, I said flatly. Not a question. I'm not okay with any of my children being hurt, she replied, her voice small. But I don't know how to make everyone happy right now. The conversation limped along for another few minutes, neither of us saying what we really meant until I couldn't bear it anymore. I ended the call with a hollow, happy early birthday, Mom, that contained none of the warmth I'd always felt for her. The betrayal cut deep on multiple levels. My sister's actions were painful enough, but my mother's passive acceptance felt like a secondary wound that somehow hurt even more. She had always been our mediator, the one who insisted on fairness and inclusion. Now she was standing by while I was pushed aside, all to keep the peace with people who clearly didn't value the kind of peace our family had once cherished. I sat in my darkened apartment after the call, the custom locket I'd ordered sitting in its velvet box on my coffee table, suddenly seeming like an artifact from a reality that no longer existed. That night was one of the longest of my life. I cycled through emotions like channels on an old television. Anger, hurt, disbelief, more anger, then a hollow sadness that seemed to have no bottom. I paced my apartment, too restless to sit, too exhausted to do anything productive. Around 2 in the morning, I found myself pulling out old family photo albums that I'd digitized but kept for sentimental reasons. There we were, the four of us at Cape Cod, my 10th birthday, Stephanie's high school graduation. Dad always with that slight squint because he hated having his picture taken but endured it for Mom's sake. Mom looking at him in so many of these photos with an expression of complete contentment. Had I imagined that family? Had we really been as happy as these frozen moments suggested? My logical brain tried to rationalize Mom's behavior. She'd always been a peacekeeper, conflict averse to a fault. Dad used to gently tease her about it. Linda would apologize to a burglar for not having more valuable stuff to steal. Without him as her backbone, had she simply defaulted to the path of least resistance, was Stephanie with her forceful personality, and now Gregory's family influence, simply the stronger gravitational pull. Understanding the why didn't lessen the pain of the what. I'd been cast aside, deemed expendable at a family celebration. The thought kept hitting me in waves, each one triggering physical symptoms: a tight chest, a churning stomach, the pressure of unshed tears. My phone buzzed with messages from friends. Word had apparently gotten out. From Alex: dude, your sister is way out of line. Want to come over and demolish a pizza? While trash-talking her. From Rebecca: just heard what happened. That's messed up. Call me if you need to talk. From Jordan: family sucks sometimes. Bar tonight. First rounds on me. Their support warmed me, but also highlighted how none of them could truly understand. They came from functional families where sibling disagreements didn't result in excommunication, where parents didn't allow one child to banish another. Around dawn, bleary-eyed and emotionally drained, I found myself staring at the locket I'd ordered for Mom. The jeweler had done a beautiful job. The gold caught the first rays of morning light coming through my window, and when I clicked it open, Dad's smile seemed to hold all the warmth that had drained from my current reality. I'd chosen a photo from their 25th anniversary, his arm around her shoulders, both of them looking not at the camera, but at each other. I snapped the locket shut and placed it back in its box with a decisiveness that surprised me. She would never see it now. Not after she'd allowed this to happen. The thought triggered a restlessness I couldn't contain. I needed to be anywhere but here, where every corner of my apartment reminded me of the family connections I'd thought were unbreakable. I opened my laptop, not even sure what I was looking for, until my fingers typed last-minute travel deals into the search bar. The algorithm, knowing my browsing history better than I knew myself, immediately suggested European destinations. Dad had always wanted to visit Paris. He'd studied French architecture in college and kept a small Eiffel Tower model on his desk. But practical concerns and raising 2 kids had pushed that dream perpetually into someday. After his death, Mom had mentioned occasionally that she still hoped to go to see the places he'd loved from afar. And there, it was a last-minute deal on a flight to Paris, leaving the following evening. The price was steep, but not impossible, thanks to my recent promotion. 7 days in Paris, a city I'd never seen 3,000 miles from a birthday party I was no longer welcome to attend. My cursor hovered over the Book Now button for several heartbeats. Was I really considering this, running away to Paris like some protagonist in a coming-of-age novel? It seemed simultaneously ridiculous and exactly right. I clicked the button. The confirmation page appeared with a cheerful, "Congratulations on your trip to Paris," as if I'd made this decision from a place of joy rather than pain. I stared at it for a long moment, wondering if I should cancel immediately. Instead, I closed my laptop and went to find my passport. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of practical preparations. I notified my team lead that I was taking emergency personal time. I arranged for my neighbor to water my houseplants. I packed with mechanical efficiency, barely registering what I was throwing into my suitcase. Only one decision required real thought: whether to take Mom's gift. Some petty part of me wanted to leave it behind as a symbolic gesture. But another part, perhaps the part that still believed in the family I remembered, couldn't bear to abandon it. I tucked the velvet box into my carry-on, telling myself I was just keeping my options open. As the Uber approached Logan Airport, I composed a brief text to Mom, taking some time away. "Don't worry about me. Hope the party is everything you want it to be. I hesitated over the wording deleted and rewrote it 3 times before finally hitting send and then powering off my phone completely. The international terminal was busy with summer travelers. Families corralling excited children, couples holding hands, business travelers striding purposefully with their compact luggage. I felt disconnected from all of them, moving through the security line and to my gate like a ghost. On the plane, I found myself seated beside an elderly couple, Harold and Margaret, who reminded me painfully of what my parents might have looked like had Dad lived to grow old with Mom. They were traveling to Paris for their 50th anniversary, a trip they'd been planning for years. "Second honeymoon," Margaret asked me with a twinkle in her eye after we'd exchanged pleasantries. "No, just needed a change of scenery," I replied vaguely. "Best reason to travel," Harold nodded sagely. "Fresh eyes for fresh perspectives." Their kindness made my throat tight. When they showed me photos of their children and grandchildren, all of whom had chipped in for their anniversary trip, I found myself wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. Was I overreacting? Should I have fought harder to resolve things with Mom and Stephanie rather than literally fleeing the country? As the plane took off, lifting me away from American soil, I stared out the window at the receding Boston skyline. The city where I'd built my independent adult life grew smaller until it disappeared altogether, swallowed by clouds and distance. Ahead lay Paris, a city of strangers where no one knew my name or my family drama. The thought was both terrifying and liberating. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I finally fell into an exhausted sleep, the locket in my pocket, a small, heavy reminder of everything I was leaving behind. Paris in June should have been magical. The city of light, love, and limitless beauty, at least according to every movie I'd ever seen. Instead, I experienced it through a fog of jet lag and emotional numbness that dulled its colors and muffled its sounds. My hotel was a small, family-run place in Montmartre, with a window that offered a sliver of a view towards Sacré-Cœur. The elderly proprietor, Madame Rousseau, spoke limited English, but seemed to sense my distress, offering a sympathetic smile and an extra croissant with my coffee each morning. I wondered what she saw when she looked at me, just another lonely American tourist, or something more specifically broken. I spent my first 2 days wandering aimlessly through the tourist spots I felt obligated to visit. The Eiffel Tower, impressive, but crowded. The Louvre, overwhelming in both size and beauty. Notre Dame still partially closed for reconstruction after the fire. I took obligatory photos but felt no urge to share them on social media, where family and friends might see. These weren't souvenirs of a joyful experience. They were documentation of an escape. My phone remained mostly off. I turned it on briefly each evening to check work emails, ignoring the growing number of text and voicemail notifications. Part of me hoped for a message from Mom that would make everything right, an apology, an insistence that of course I was welcome at her birthday, a promise to stand up to Stephanie. But I was also terrified of seeing confirmation that the party was proceeding without me, that my absence was barely a footnote in their celebration. On the evening of Mom's actual birthday, I found myself sitting alone at a small cafe near the Seine, nursing a glass of wine I couldn't taste and watching the boats drift by. A few tables away, a French family was celebrating what appeared to be a grandfather's birthday. 3 generations gathered around a modest cake, singing and laughing together. The old man's face was alight with joy as he looked around at his loved ones. The sight pierced through my numbness. Hot tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them embarrassing me, even though no one was paying attention. I left too many euros on the table and hurried away, walking aimlessly, until I found myself in a quiet bookstore tucked away on a side street. Les Mots à la Bouche was warm and smelled of paper and possibility. I wandered through the stacks, running my fingers along book spines, most in French, but with a small English section in the back. I was examining a collection of Hemingway's Paris essays when a voice beside me asked, "First time in Paris?" I turned to find a woman about my age, maybe a few years older, with short dark hair and intelligent eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses. Something in her direct gaze made lying seem pointless. "That obvious, huh?" She smiled slightly. "You have that lost look. Not just the, where's the nearest metro lost, but the deeper kind." Her American accent was a surprise East Coast, but not Boston, maybe Philadelphia. "Just taking in the sights," I said noncommittally, replacing the book on the shelf. "No, you're not," she countered, surprising me. You're physically here, but you're not taking anything in. I've been watching you stare at that same page for 5 minutes without reading a word. I should have been offended by her presumption, but something about her matter-of-fact delivery disarmed me. Rough week, I admitted. I'm Claire, she said, offering her hand. American expat, 5 years in Paris, art teacher at the international school, and occasional deliverer of unwanted observations to strangers in bookstores. Marion, I replied, shaking her hand. Software engineer, 4 days in Paris, and currently failing at being a tourist. Hungry, she asked. Because I know a place that's much better than those tourist traps by the river. Real Parisian food. Not the overpriced stuff they serve to visitors. I hesitated, years of stranger danger warnings competing with an unexpected desire for real human connection. I don't want to impose on your evening. You'd be saving me from eating alone while grading mediocre art projects, she said with a grin. Unless you're secretly an axe murderer, in which case at least pick a more interesting bookstore for victim selection. Her irreverence startled a genuine laugh out of me, my first since arriving in Paris. No axe, just emotional baggage. Perfect, Claire nodded. I specialize in emotional baggage. Comes with the territory of being an American in Paris. We're all running from something. She led me to a tiny restaurant called Le Petit Coin, so unassuming I would have walked past it without a second glance. Inside it was warm and bustling, with tables close enough together that conversation between neighbors seemed inevitable. The owner greeted Claire with kisses on both cheeks and rapid-fire French that made my high school language classes seem woefully inadequate. Over coq au vin and a bottle of excellent red wine, Claire proved easy to talk to. She shared her story first. An art history degree that led to a teaching job that brought her to Paris temporarily 5 years ago. And you never left, I observed. Paris has a way of keeping people, she agreed. Though family drama helped too. My parents expected me to take over the family real estate business in Philadelphia. Coming here was my not-so-subtle rebellion. Did they forgive you? Eventually. Mom still sends me Zillow listings for condos in Philly every month, but it's more of a running joke now than actual pressure. She studied me over her wine glass. Your turn. What brings you to Paris alone with that storm cloud over your head? Maybe it was the wine or the strange freedom of talking to someone who knew nothing about me, but I found myself telling her everything. The birthday planning gone wrong. Stephanie's transformation under Gregory's influence. Mom's betrayal by inaction. My impulsive flight. Claire listened without interruption, only occasionally lifting an eyebrow or nodding in understanding. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. That's quite an exit strategy, she finally said. Childish, right, I grimaced. Running away instead of dealing with it. I was going to say dramatic, but effective, she corrected. Sometimes distance is exactly what you need to see a situation clearly. And sometimes people don't realize what they've lost until it's gone. I'm not sure they've even noticed, I admitted. Mom's party is tonight. They're probably all having a wonderful time at that country club networking with the society pages. Or Claire countered, your mom is missing you terribly and realizing she made a massive mistake. Perspective goes both ways, you know. After dinner, Claire invited me to join her and some friends at a jazz club nearby. I almost declined out of habit. The thought of making small talk with strangers seemed exhausting. But the alternative was returning to my silent hotel room with only my thoughts for company. Why not, I said, surprising myself. The club Le Cave du 38 Rive was intimate and smoky despite Paris's indoor smoking ban. Claire's friends were an eclectic mix. Jean-Philippe, a French literature professor. Amir, a Syrian refugee, turned successful chef. Sophie, a British fashion photographer, and Marcus, an American novelist, perpetually working on a book about expatriate life. They welcomed me without prying, drawing me into their conversations about everything from French politics to the best place to find authentic Vietnamese food in Paris. They debated passionately in a mix of English and French, disagreeing vehemently on some points, while remaining unfailingly respectful. For the first time since arriving in Paris, perhaps for the first time since receiving Stephanie's devastating text, I found myself laughing genuinely, the knot in my chest loosening slightly. These strangers had no expectations of me, no shared history, no knowledge of my family drama. I could simply exist in the moment with them. As we walked back through the Parisian streets after midnight, Claire fell into step beside me while the others walked ahead. "They liked you," she said simply. "You should join us tomorrow. I'm giving an unofficial tour of my favorite Paris spots. The ones you won't find in guidebooks. Don't you have work teaching?" "Summer break," she grinned. "The perks of academia. Besides saving emotionally wounded Americans is my side hustle." I laughed. "Is that what you're doing, saving me?" She shrugged. "Maybe we're saving each other from boring routines. 7:30 tomorrow by the fountain at Place des Vosges. Wear comfortable shoes." As I returned to my hotel, I realized I'd gone hours without thinking about Mom's birthday party. The pain was still there, but Claire and her friends had provided a brief respite, a glimpse of what it might feel like to move beyond this hurt. For the first time since arriving in Paris, I slept without dreaming of home. Claire's real Paris tour began early the next morning and continued for days, expanding to include her various friends who drifted in and out of our explorations. She showed me the city through a resident's eyes, the best time to visit Luxembourg Gardens early morning before the tourists, which bakeries had the most authentic pain au chocolat, a tiny place run by 3 generations of the same family, where to find hidden artwork in unsuspecting alleys, street art that rivaled museum pieces. We explored the parts of Paris that tourists rarely see: working-class neighborhoods with vibrant immigrant communities, abandoned railway tracks transformed into elevated gardens, tiny specialized museums dedicated to unexpected subjects like the history of locks or medical instruments. Through it all, Claire offered not just companionship but perspective. Unlike my friends back home who knew me too well to challenge me, she had no problem calling out my emotional blind spots. "So your sister's changing to impress her boyfriend's family," she observed as we shared pastries on a bench overlooking the Seine. "That's disappointing, but hardly surprising. People often shape themselves to fit relationships, especially new ones. But she's throwing away everything our family valued," I countered. "Dad would have hated this whole country club scene." "Your dad's gone," Claire said bluntly but not unkindly. "And everyone left behind is trying to figure out how to move forward. Your sister's method sucks, but the motivation might be understandable." Her forthright assessments were jarring but strangely helpful. She had no stake in making me feel better with platitudes or validating my anger. Instead, she pushed me to examine the situation from all angles, including uncomfortable ones. "And your mom," Claire continued, breaking off a piece of her croissant, "is caught between her children, probably terrified of losing either of you. That doesn't excuse her passivity, but it explains it." Gradually, I found myself collecting moments and observations. I wanted to share with Mom eventually how the architecture Dad had admired looked in real life, the way the light hit Notre Dame at sunset, the surprising affordability of the neighborhood markets compared to American grocery stores. On our 5th day together, Claire took me to Père Lachaise Cemetery. As we wandered among the elaborate tombs and memorials, the conversation naturally turned to loss. "My dad always wanted to see Paris," I said, stopping by a particularly beautiful stone angel. He had this whole architectural tour planned, buildings he'd studied in college that he wanted to see in person. But he never made it. Claire guessed softly. "Always, someday," I confirmed. Work was busy. We were growing up, there were college tuitions to save for. Then suddenly there were no more somedays left. "That's why you brought the locket," she observed. "Even angry as you are, you're still carrying his memory and hers with you." I hadn't told her about carrying the locket in my pocket every day, a habit I'd fallen into without fully acknowledging it. Her perception was uncanny. "I don't know what to do with it now," I admitted. "It feels wrong to give it to her after everything, but also wrong to keep it." "Maybe the answer isn't clear yet," Claire suggested. "But I do think you should check your messages." Running away made a point. Staying completely disconnected might be taking it too far. That evening in my hotel room, after a week of avoidance, I finally powered on my phone fully and braced myself for the onslaught of notifications. There were concerned texts from friends, a few work emails I'd missed, and my heart stuttered 17 missed calls from Mom, along with numerous texts and voicemails. I skipped all of these temporarily curiosity driving me to open Instagram first. Several mutual friends had posted photos from Mom's birthday party. With each swipe, a clearer picture emerged, and it wasn't what I'd expected. Mom looked miserable in every photo. Her smile was forced her eyes, lacking the sparkle that characterized her genuine happiness. She was dressed in an elegant but uncomfortable-looking black dress that I'd never seen before, nothing like the colorful clothes she typically loved. The venue was indeed the country club, decorated in an austere black and white theme that felt cold and impersonal. Stephanie appeared in many photos, always with Gregory by her side, always seeming to be introducing Mom to people she clearly didn't know. The forced networking was painfully obvious, even through photographs. Most telling was a close-up someone had captured of Mom sitting alone at a table looking down at something in her hands. I zoomed in and felt my breath catch. It was her old locket, the one with Dad's photo that she'd worn for years after his death before finally putting it away as part of her healing process. She had taken it out again for the party, despite it clashing with her formal attire. The comments were equally revealing. "Linda, it was lovely to meet you. Gregory's mother has told us so much about you. Beautiful venue, though. Missed seeing your son there. Hope everything's okay with Marion. Such an elegant affair. Though not quite what I expected based on your usual wonderful gatherings." With shaking hands, I finally accessed my voicemail, starting with the most recent and working backward. Mom's voice tearful. "Marion, please call me. I don't care what time it is there. I need to know you're okay. I made a terrible mistake. Please." Mom, again, the party was not what I wanted. Stephanie and I had a huge fight afterward. I should have stood up for you. For us. For our family. I'm so sorry. Please let me know you're safe. Several similar messages, increasing in distress the further back I went. And then a voicemail from the actual night of the party. "Marion, I wish you were here. Nothing feels right without you. This isn't the celebration I wanted. These people aren't my friends. I miss you. I miss your father. I miss who we used to be as a family. I've made a horrible mistake letting Stephanie push you away. Please call me when you can." The text told a similar story of regret and worry, culminating in a final one sent just hours ago. "Your work said you took personal time but wouldn't say more. Please, just let me know you're alive and safe. I love you." I sat on the edge of my bed, phone clutched in my hand as tears streamed down my face. The party had been a disaster. Mom had been miserable. And most importantly, she recognized the mistake and regretted it deeply. I called Claire, words tumbling out as I explained what I'd discovered. "I have to call her," I finished. "She thinks I've disappeared." "Go to the Eiffel Tower," Claire suggested. "Call her from there. If your dad loved Paris architecture, that's the perfect place to bridge the distance." The next morning found me ascending the Eiffel Tower as it opened before the worst of the tourist crowds. On the second level, with Paris spread out before me in the clear morning light, I finally called Mom. She answered on the first ring. Marion. Her voice was thick with emotion and lack of sleep. "Hi, Mom." My own voice wavered despite my best efforts. "Oh, thank God," she breathed. "Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm in Paris," I said. "At the Eiffel Tower, actually. Dad's favorite building." A small sob escaped her. "Paris. You went all the way to Paris." I needed distance, I explained, watching a tour boat glide along the Seine far below. "I couldn't be there knowing I wasn't welcome at your party." "I'm so sorry," she said, the words coming in a rush. "I should never have let Stephanie exclude you. The party was awful. All these strangers. None of our traditions. Nothing that made it feel like me or our family. Stephanie and Gregory were parading me around like some trophy to impress his parents' friends. I barely got to talk to anyone I actually care about." "I saw the photos," I admitted. "You looked miserable." "I was," she confirmed. "And when several people asked where you were, I finally broke down and admitted what had happened. Marion, I've never been so ashamed. Our family friend Ruth, you remember Ruth, she looked at me like I was a stranger. She said, "Linda Calloway, the woman I know would never allow one of her children to push the other away." "What happened then?" I asked, gripping the railing tightly. "I left my own party," Mom said with a hint of defiance that reminded me of her stronger self. "Just walked out. Stephanie followed me to the parking lot, and we had the worst fight we've ever had. I told her she'd changed, that she was so busy trying to impress Gregory's family that she'd forgotten who she really was, who we were." We were both crying now, connected by grief and regret despite the Atlantic Ocean between us. "I miss who we used to be," she continued softly. "All of us. I've been so lost since your father died, trying to figure out who I am without him. But allowing you to be pushed aside wasn't the answer. It was just weakness." "I miss him too," I said, looking out over the city he'd longed to see. "That's part of why I came here. He always wanted to visit Paris. He would have loved knowing you went," she said, her voice warming. "Are you? Will you come home soon? Can we try to fix this?" The question hung between us, weighted with hope and fear. "I have 3 more days on my hotel reservation," I said. And then, "Yes, I'll come home. But things need to change, Mom. I can't just pretend this didn't happen." "I know," she agreed quickly. "I want to change. I want us to be honest with each other again. Stephanie needs to hear some hard truths too from both of us." We talked for nearly an hour, making tentative plans for when I returned. She would invite Stephanie over for a family meeting. We would lay everything out in the open, the hurt, the expectations, the boundaries that needed to be established. As we said goodbye, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The hurt wasn't gone, but it had transformed into something manageable, something that could potentially lead to healing rather than permanent estrangement. Later that day, as Claire and I walked along the banks of the Seine, I told her about the conversation. "So you're cutting your trip short?" she asked. By a few days, I nodded. "It feels right. I came here running away, but now I'm choosing to go back and face things." "That's growth," she smiled, "though I'll miss my American project." "I'm not just a project," I protested with a laugh. "No," she agreed seriously. "You're a friend now, and Paris has a way of making those connections stick." The decision to return early set off a cascade of practical arrangements, changing my flight, settling my hotel bill, packing the small collection of souvenirs I'd acquired. But the more challenging task was preparing emotionally for what awaited me in Boston. While Claire helped me navigate the logistics, she also pushed me to think beyond the immediate reconciliation with Mom. "What about Stephanie?" she asked as we shared a final dinner at a bistro near my hotel. "Are you ready to face her too?" "I don't know," I admitted. "The hurt there feels different, more direct, more intentional. Siblings can wound us deeper than anyone." Claire nodded. "My brother and I didn't speak for 2 years after a fight about our parents' care. When we finally reconnected, we had to rebuild from the foundation." "How did you start?" "With a letter," she said. "I wrote everything I needed to say without expectation of response. It was for me, as much as for him. Getting it all out cleared space for whatever came next." That night, I took her advice. In my hotel room, with the sounds of Paris drifting through the partially open window, I opened my laptop and began to write to Stephanie. The words came slowly at first. Then, in a rush, "Stéphanie, by the time you read this, I'll be on my way home from Paris." Yes, Paris, Dad's dream city that became my escape when I learned I wasn't welcome at Mom's birthday. I'm not writing to make you feel guilty, though I won't pretend the hurt doesn't run deep. I'm writing because we're family, and beneath all the recent conflict that still means something to me. I don't recognize the person you've become lately. Someone who would exclude her brother to impress her boyfriend's family. Someone who would dismiss our family traditions as low class. Someone who seems embarrassed by the life and values that shaped us. But I also remember the sister who taught me to ride a bike, who defended me against bullies in middle school, who cried with me at Dad's funeral and promised we'd always have each other's backs. That's the Stephanie I'm hoping still exists somewhere beneath the country club memberships and society page aspirations. Mom and I have talked. I'm coming home to rebuild what's broken between us. I hope you'll be part of that rebuilding. But that's your choice. What I won't do is pretend everything's fine when it isn't, or accept being pushed aside when family gatherings become inconvenient to your new social circle. Dad raised us to value honesty, loyalty, and treating people with dignity. I still believe in those principles. I hope you do too, somewhere beneath the surface. Your brother Marion. I read it over several times, editing for tone and clarity before saving it as a draft. I wouldn't send it yet. This was something better delivered after I'd spoken with Mom in person. Claire insisted on accompanying me to Charles de Gaulle Airport for my departure. As we waited at the gate, she handed me a small wrapped package. A going-away present, she explained. Nothing fancy. Inside was a keychain with a small silver Eiffel Tower charm. So you don't forget your Paris escape, she said with a smile. And maybe a reminder that sometimes running away can lead you right where you need to be. I won't forget, I promised, surprisingly emotional about leaving someone I'd known for barely a week. Thank you for, well, everything. Keep in touch, she said. I want updates on the family drama. And maybe someday you'll come back to Paris for the right reasons. I'd like that. I nodded, realizing I meant it. The flight home was a stark contrast to my journey out. Where I'd been numb with pain and confusion before, I now felt a complex mix of anticipation, nervousness, and cautious hope. I spent much of the flight working on the letter to Stephanie, refining it until it expressed both my hurt and my hope for reconciliation, without venturing into accusation or bitterness. I also made another important decision. The locket, which had traveled with me to Paris and back unopened, would still be given to Mom as originally intended. Not as if nothing had happened, but as a symbol that some bonds remained unbroken despite the pain between us. When we landed at Logan Airport, I turned on my phone to find a text from Mom. I'm at the airport. Terminal E arrivals. Only if you want to see me. I can leave if you need space. The sight of her waiting by the baggage claim sent a surge of emotions through me: love, lingering, hurt, relief. She looked smaller somehow. Her usual confident posture diminished by worry. When she spotted me, her face transformed with relief and tentative joy. Neither of us spoke as we closed the distance between us. The hug that followed said everything. Words couldn't. I'm sorry. I've missed you. We can fix this. You came, I said, finally stepping back to look at her. Of course I came, she replied, wiping away tears. I needed to see for myself that you were okay. I noticed she was wearing her old locket, the one with Dad's photo that she'd taken out for the birthday party. It rested against her blue sweater, a familiar sight from the years after his death. You're wearing the locket again, I observed as we walked toward the parking garage. She touched it reflexively. It felt right to have him close again. I've been thinking about him so much lately, wondering what he would say about all this. He'd probably say we're all being ridiculous, I offered with a small smile. And he'd be right, she agreed. He always could cut through the drama and get to the heart of things. The drive from Logan to her house in Lexington gave us time to talk more openly. She told me about the aftermath of the disastrous party, how several of her oldest friends had expressed concern about the obvious tensions, how the elaborate event had felt like a performance rather than a celebration. The worst part, she admitted, was seeing all these strangers, in a place I didn't choose, celebrating a milestone in my life, in a way that had nothing to do with who I am. And the one person who would have made it meaningful, you wasn't there because I didn't have the courage to stand up for what matters. Have you talked to Stephanie since I asked? Mom sighed. She's called several times. I told her we needed to have a family meeting when you got back. She wasn't thrilled about the idea, but I made it clear it wasn't optional. And Gregory. I told her this is family business. Gregory isn't invited. Her tone held a firmness I hadn't heard in years. I've been too passive, Marion. After your father died, it was easier to just go along with things to avoid conflict. But I'm done with that now. As we pulled into her driveway, the familiar sight of my childhood home brought a wave of complicated emotions. This house held so many memories: happy family dinners, Christmas mornings, homework at the kitchen table, and later the grief-filled days after Dad's funeral. It represented everything that had been good about our family, and everything we stood to lose if we couldn't find our way back to each other. "I'm glad you're home," Mom said simply as she turned off the engine. "Whatever happens with Stephanie tomorrow, I want you to know that." For the first time since receiving that devastating text message weeks ago, I felt like I truly was home. Stephanie arrived exactly on time the next morning. Her punctuality, a trait she'd inherited from Dad. She looked immaculate as always. Designer jeans, cashmere sweater. Not a hair out of place, but her expression betrayed her nervousness. She hesitated when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table as if unsure whether to offer a hug or keep her distance. "Marion," she said finally, "you're back." As requested, I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Family meeting, right?" Mom gestured for Stephanie to sit. "Coffee's ready. I thought we could talk in here rather than the living room. More casual." The kitchen had always been the heart of our home, the place where important family discussions happened. Homework problems were solved at this table. College decisions debated. Financial challenges navigated. It felt right to be here now, surrounded by the familiar yellow walls Dad had painted himself, and the collection of mismatched mugs that told our family history. So Mom began after pouring coffee for everyone. "I think we all know why we're here. What happened with my birthday celebration exposed some serious problems in our family. And it's time we addressed them honestly." I expected Stephanie to be defensive immediately, but she surprised me by nodding slightly. "I agree." Marion, Mom continued, "Would you like to start? Tell Stephanie how her actions made you feel." I'd rehearsed this moment mentally during the flight home, careful to focus on I statements rather than accusations. Still looking at my sister's familiar face, the same face that had beamed with pride at my college graduation that had crumpled in grief beside me at Dad's funeral, made the prepared speech stick in my throat. "You hurt me," I said simply. "Not just by uninviting me from Mom's birthday, but by dismissing everything our family has always valued. By acting like our traditions and ways of celebrating weren't good enough anymore." Stephanie stared into her coffee cup. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," I pressed. "And I need to understand why. What happened to the sister who used to defend me, who shared the same values I did? When did Gregory's family's approval become more important than your own brother?" The question hung in the air between us. Stephanie took a deep breath, her composed facade cracking slightly. "It's not that simple," she began. "After Dad died, I felt like everything was falling apart. Mom was depressed, you buried yourself in work and moved to Boston, and I was just lost. Then I met Gregory, and his family was so stable, so confident about everything. They had all these connections, this whole world that seemed so much more secure than ours. So you tried to become like them," Mom said softly. Stephanie nodded, tears forming. "I thought if I could be part of their world, I wouldn't feel so adrift anymore. And they accepted me. But there was always this pressure to fit in, to measure up. Gregory's mom has very specific ideas about what's appropriate for family events." "And that's why you cut me out?" I asked. "Because I didn't fit their image." "You kept pushing back against all the changes," she said, finally meeting my eyes. "Every suggestion I made based on what would impress them, you countered, with how Dad would have done it. It felt like you were anchoring us to the past while I was trying to build a secure future. By erasing who we are," I countered. "By acting ashamed of our middle-class background and traditions." "I wasn't ashamed," she protested, but her expression told a different story. "I just wanted something more polished." Mom reached across the table to take Stephanie's hand. "Sweetheart, the party was a disaster. All those people Gregory's family wanted to impress, they didn't care about me. They were there for networking and to be seen. My real friends were uncomfortable, and so was I." "Gregory said it was a huge success," Stephanie said, confusion crossing her face. "For his family's social standing, maybe," Mom replied gently, "but not for celebrating my life or our family. When Marion wasn't there, it felt wrong from the start. And when Ruth called me out on allowing you to exclude your brother, I finally saw clearly what had been happening. I'd let myself become a prop in someone else's social climbing, and worse, I'd failed to protect the family your father and I built." Stephanie's carefully constructed composure finally broke. Tears streamed down her face as years of pent-up grief and confusion poured out. "I miss Dad so much," she sobbed. "When he died, it felt like our foundation cracked. I've been trying so hard to build something that feels secure again. I moved around the table and after a moment's hesitation put my arm around her shoulders. Despite everything, she was still my little sister. We all miss him, I said. But pretending to be something we're not won't bring security. Dad would hate seeing us lose ourselves trying to impress people who don't even know us. Gregory's family looks perfect from the outside, Stephanie admitted through tears, but they're so cold to each other. His parents haven't said I love you to him in years. Everything is about appearances and connections. I thought that was normal for successful people. Success meant something different to your father, Mom said firmly. It meant integrity, kindness, building a family where everyone felt valued. By those measures, he was the most successful man I've ever known. The conversation continued for hours, painful truth surfacing that had been buried since Dad's death. Stephanie admitted feeling jealous of my ability to move forward professionally while she felt stuck. I confessed to running away to Paris, partly to punish them both for excluding me. Mom acknowledged how her passivity had allowed family bonds to weaken. By afternoon, exhausted, but clearer than we'd been in years, we reached a tentative peace. Stephanie agreed to re-examine her relationship with Gregory and the values his family was imposing on her. I promised to be more present and not retreat into work when family conflicts arose. Mom committed to taking a more active role in maintaining our family's integrity. I have something for you, I told Mom, retrieving the velvet box from my luggage. Your original birthday gift. I carried it all the way to Paris and back. She opened it with trembling hands, gasping softly when she saw the locket. It's beautiful. Open it, I urged. Inside was the photo of Dad I'd carefully selected, along with the inscription, "Always with you." I was thinking, I said, as she wiped away fresh tears, maybe we could plan a small family gathering, a real celebration of your birthday the way Dad would have done it. Nothing fancy, just the people who actually care about you. I'd like that she nodded. And maybe, someday, we could all go to Paris together. See the places your father always wanted to visit. I'd like to show you around, I smiled. I know some excellent local spots now. The following months brought gradual healing. Stephanie broke up with Gregory after realizing how much she'd changed to accommodate his family's expectations. It wasn't an easy decision, but as she put it, I'd rather be alone and authentic than coupled and living someone else's life. We held the promised birthday redo for Mom. A backyard gathering with string lights, homemade food, and Dad's favorite music playing. Her real friends came bringing thoughtful gifts and genuine affection. The locket I'd given her now contained 3 photos, Dad on one side, Stephanie and me on the other, symbolizing our past and present connected. I maintained my friendship with Claire through regular video calls, updating her on our family's healing process and hearing about her Parisian adventures. She'd become an unexpected anchor, someone who knew me at my lowest point but had still seen value in me. 6 months after my impulsive flight to Paris, our family dynamics had permanently changed, but for the better. The superficial harmony of the past had been replaced by something more authentic, a relationship where disagreements could be expressed honestly without threatening our fundamental bonds. Mom had found her voice again, no longer allowing herself to be sidelined in her own life. Stephanie had reconnected with her authentic self, rediscovering the values Dad had instilled in us. And I had learned that sometimes standing up for yourself means being willing to walk away, but that true resolution comes from having the courage to return and do the difficult work of rebuilding. The 3 of us began planning a family trip to Paris for the following summer, a proper visit to fulfill Dad's dream to see the city through appreciative eyes rather than as an escape route. I'd be the tour guide showing them the hidden gems Claire had revealed to me. Looking back, I realized that running away to Paris was both an ending and a beginning. It marked the death of old family patterns that weren't serving us anymore, but also the birth of a more authentic way of relating to each other. Sometimes the longest journeys lead us right back where we belong, but with new eyes to see what truly matters. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love to make them understand your worth, or found yourself changing to fit someone else's expectations? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. I read every one. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real talk about family dynamics and personal growth. And if you know someone struggling with family conflicts, Share this video. Sometimes hearing another person's journey can help us navigate our own. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, it's never too late to rebuild what matters most.